Tonight on Bridge City News, Lethbridge City Council's decision to give the go-ahead for a new women's transitional housing facility in a residential area is getting some mixed reactions. RCMP are still searching for a suspect after a shooting at the Cross Iron Mills Mall just outside of Calgary left one man injured. And affordable housing and children were the focus on day 7 of the federal election campaign.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A group of residents on Scenic Drive are extremely unhappy with a motion put forth at City Council yesterday. Streets Alive Mission now has permission to rezone property which will house 20 women who are recovering from addiction. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how the contentious evening played out.
The residents of Scenic Heights are angry. Many of them wrote letters, and more than a dozen spoke to council, from doctors to school children. They say council's decision to allow Streets Alive to house 20 women in addictions recovery will affect their livelihoods.
We've invested our whole life in this place, and to devalue our retirement, it would be devastating. We may even pull out of this city.
An area that has high property values, high taxation, and if a group home next to us housing 20 women comes in, our properties won't be anywhere near the value that they are now.
A petition was signed, and every house in the area but one agreed that the bylaw should not be changed. Council voted 5-2 in favor of Streets Alive.
I find that very difficult to buy, okay? So to me, the argument was made that we don't want you here. But those are not those, I know the Gillettes, I know the Lakes, I know those people. They are not that kind of people. But if that's what's going to convince the council and us to not come, why not say it?
Many of the residents agreed that they support Streets Alive, but they just don't want the facility in their backyard.
Not in my backyard will show up in every neighborhood. No matter where we go, because of the fear, it will show up in every neighborhood. But we want to be an inclusive city. So to be an inclusive city, we have to include people who are trying to recover their lives in the neighborhoods. Mayor Chris Spearman and councillors Jeff Kaufman, Belinda Croson, Mark Campbell, and Rob Miyashiro voted in favor of the motion. Councillor Blaine Higgin and Ryan Parker voted against, while Joe Morrow excused himself due to a conflict of interest. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The City of Lethbridge will be funding a discussion paper to uncover the root causes of addictions in southern Alberta. Council voted 7-2 to have a qualified researcher use existing information for the project instead of conducting a brand new study.
You really can't resolve a problem until you understand it, and so it's very important that we understand what the roots of the conditions are. Once you understand what the roots are, you now can create a strategic plan in order to identify them, in order to find the appropriate resources, and find the appropriate partners.
Councillor Jeff Kaufman has long advocated for this type of research. The City of Lethbridge now has an official greeting, Oki. The Blackfoot word means welcome or greetings. It will soon appear on formal branding associated with the city, and Mayor Chris Spearman is encouraging local businesses to use the greeting as well.
We had a bit of a surprise. The university in the new science building opened up, and they began producing these 3-dimensional Oki signs. If they're still available, it'd be really cool to see local stores put the Oki sign in their window, which would symbolize that Indigenous people are welcome. And I think that would be a really cool message. So being inviting, being respectful is all of our responsibility.
The mayor brought forth an additional motion to make October 4th Sisters in Spirit Day. The day will remember the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women in our city and beyond. Amanda Scout, co-chair of Lethbridge's Reconciliation Committee, was grateful that the motion was passed.
We're very connected people, connected to each other, so when that happens, it affects all of us. We do have family members in our group back here somewhere. Where's Kaylee? Right here. Kaylee's mom was a victim of how many years ago? 20 years ago. So yeah, we are affected. and it's important that we acknowledge that. Well, I mean, it's important to all of us, and it's not going to happen or work unless everybody's working on it. So it's really important that our leaders show us the way, and we're just lucky here that we've got that in our leadership right now.
Statistics show that Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to experience violence than non-Indigenous women. According to Trevor Lewington, Lethbridge's Economic Development Officer, our city has fired on all cylinders over the past few years. A report released by the Conference Board of Canada says that the economy has expanded by nearly 6% since 2017. He says much of this success has come from new employment opportunities.
We had pretty strong job growth last year as well, so there were about 2,000 jobs added to the economy last year, and they predict very similar numbers for the next couple of years here in Lethbridge. So again, strong economy, the fundamentals are solid, lots of prospects for continued job growth, and at the same time, we're one of the most affordable housing areas in Western Canada, actually. We have some of the lowest housing and lowest rent prices. So not only is it a strong economy with great job prospects, but it's also an affordable place to live.
The report also says that population growth in Lethbridge remains solid at 1.9%. Lethbridge police are investigating a street robbery after cash was stolen from a woman near Galt Gardens. A 53-year-old woman was confronted by two females just before 2 a.m. yesterday. The women approached her from behind and grabbed onto her wheelchair, grabbing the cash and also striking her in the head. The suspects are described as being about 5 feet 9 inches tall and were wearing Halloween masks, black hoodies, and black pants. Anyone with information on this is asked to contact police. Pincher Creek and area residents were invited to share their input on local health care at a meeting of the Oldman River Health Advisory Council today. Officials provided an update on health services and made a presentation about harm reduction services in the region.
We're dealing with opioid crises across the board and advising the best we can accordingly. We're naturally aware of the issues around mental health and addictions. We've got certainly an eye towards our graying population, the growing number of senior citizens and what impact that will have. AHS is responding as best they can, and of course they will continue to do so. But in terms of what their standard practice in line is, it's going to be tailored, if you will, for the community at hand, but there will be common elements across the province. And of course, AHS is going to do their best in terms of what the response should look like.
Area residents can have their say by calling a toll-free line or by going online. Police north of Calgary cleared a mall store by store last night after they responded to reports of shots being fired. RCMP say they responded to Cross Iron Mills shortly after 7 and found one male in a restaurant with serious injuries. Police are still looking for the gunman. The male suspect had a slender build and was dressed fully in black, wearing a ball cap and hood. He fled the scene in a black 2019 Dodge Ram 4-door pickup truck. Two-time Olympic bobsled champ Kaylee Humphries has lost her bid to be released by Bobsleigh Canada Skeleton. The 34-year-old failed to convince a Calgary judge to grant an injunction forcing the national governing body of the sport to release her. Humphries wants to compete for the United States and has filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against BCS alleging she was harassed by a coach. The lawyer for Saskatchewan nurse says a decision to punish the woman for using Facebook to criticize her grandfather's care was based on numerous legal errors. Marcus Davies is representing Carolyn Strom, who was found guilty of professional misconduct by the Saskatchewan Registered Nurses Association in 2016 and fined $26,000. The case got underway today in the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal. The Nurses Association is asking the court whether professionals have the charter right to say whatever they want on social media and publicly embarrass healthcare facilities without getting all of the facts. A Montreal man who pleaded guilty to fatally stabbing his unborn child 19 times with a cooking fork now wants to withdraw his plea. Sofiane Ghazi told court this morning that he has fired the lawyers who represented him during the case, while the lawyers told the judge they would have asked to withdraw had Ghazi not dismissed them. Both the Crown and Quebec Superior Court Justice Jean-François Bafoni were blindsided by the move, and the case has now been postponed to next month to allow Ghazi to consult a new attorney. At a news conference today, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki said there is a lot of speculation and false information following the arrest of an employee charged with trying to disclose secret information. Cameron Ortis, who was Director General of the National Intelligence Coordination Center, was supporting the FBI and looking into internal corruption before his arrest. Lucki would not comment on reports that his arrest stemmed from the dismantling of a Canadian firm, Phantom Secure. The company sold phones to organized crime and drug traffickers that allowed uncrackable communication. Housing and children are the key issues the main party leaders are tackling on day 7 of the federal election campaign. In St. John's, Newfoundland, Justin Trudeau vowed to boost the Canada Child benefit for children under the age of 1 and make maternity and parental leave benefits tax-free. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh promised to build 500,000 affordable homes across the country within 10 years. And Conservative leader Andrew Scheer made a stop in Winnipeg, promising to boost the federal contribution to RESPs.
A post-secondary education is just about the surest route there is to a brighter future. By going to university, trade school, or college today, our kids will be better able to provide for themselves and their own families tomorrow. And that's why opening a registered education savings plan comes shortly after sending out the birth announcement for many parents. RESPs are the most effective way Canadian parents can save for their children's education, with more and more working families investing in them every year. Right now, the government gives parents a 20% grant for every dollar they put into their RESP, up to a maximum grant of $500 a year. As Prime Minister, I will increase the RESP grant from 20% to 30% for every dollar they put into their RESP, up to a maximum grant of $750 a year.
The federal candidates in Lethbridge are busy campaigning as well. The local NDP representative, Shandy Blyken, says people at the doors are telling her that climate change and affordability are front and center.
People are very concerned about the climate crisis. I've talked to young moms who are really afraid of the smoky summers, not being able to bring their little people outside, afraid of the damage to their lungs. I know many young couples who are choosing not to have children because they're so afraid of the world that they could be bringing their kids into, and that's a real concern. And the other thing that is so prevalent is people are concerned about affordability. People are struggling to pay their rent, they're struggling to pay for their prescription medication.
Hal Roberts will have a full interview with Shandy Blyken in the second half of our newscast. The federal government ran a $14 billion deficit for the fiscal year that ended March 31st. The government's third consecutive double-digit shortfall was $900 million smaller than it projected in its latest budget. The state of federal finances is a factor in the fall election campaign as parties argue whether the government should try to balance the books and how quickly that should happen. Scientists at Stanford University and the University of California, San Francisco believe they are one step closer to finding a cure for the common cold. Their research involves temporarily disabling a single specific protein inside human cells. Researchers found that when protein is disabled, it stops many common cold viruses and other diseases from spreading in the body. But don't throw away your cold medicines just yet. The research was conducted on mice and has yet to be done on humans. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for 2 deadly attacks in Afghanistan today, targeting President Ashraf Ghani's campaign rally and another near the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. A suicide bomber on a motorcycle rammed the entrance of the rally venue in northern Parwan province, killing 24 people. Ghani was unhurt. Hours later, a suicide bomber struck at an Afghan army base near the U.S. Embassy. No word yet on casualties. Saudi Arabia says its initial investigations indicate that Iranian weapons were used in Saturday's attacks on key oil installations. U.S. Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley says President Trump is being cautious when it comes to blaming Iran.
The president was pretty clear yesterday when he pointed out the fact that he feels as though Iran is likely the culprit of this attack. I mean, it was a global attack on our, attack on the global economy, and the president is dealing with all of our partners and allies in the region. We want to make sure that the evidence and the information clearly points to a culprit here. In all likelihood, as the president said, it was Iran, but when we have a definitive answer on that, we'll let you know. The president wants to make a deal with Iran. He sees great potential in the country, but I'd say for the better part of 40 years, this kind of behavior has been well documented, well known across the globe. The president wants to see that kind of behavior change. We've been tougher on Iran than any administration in history with the sanctions we put on them, up to and including yesterday from the briefing room. But they've got to change behavior if we're going to have conversations, because right now the situation's untenable.
Australian intelligence says that China was responsible for a cyber attack on its national parliament and three largest political parties before last spring's general election. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari explains.
They have an expansionist view, and with this perspective they are going everywhere, and of course they lead with what they're strong at, and that is cyber crimes and hacking and technology. And we know for a fact that they own so many of the technology highways, so to speak, the information highways in Latin America and Africa. I mean, these are places that they're investing their time and energy. They are flexing their muscles. They are taking over where maybe the rest of the world, particularly the West, is really sleeping on this.
Hal Roberts has the full interview with Lisa coming up later in the program. Israelis voted today in an unprecedented repeat election that will decide whether Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stays in power for a fifth term amid a possible indictment on corruption charges. In a tight election, votes are still being tabulated, but exit polls show that neither Netanyahu nor Benny Gantz appear to have gained a majority, and the two are likely to head to deliberations with President Rivlin to determine which of them gets the mandate to try and form a governing coalition. Well, a wet and cool day today in Lethbridge. That will stick around for another day or so before we see some improvements. Complete weather details are coming up. A few clouds overnight with a risk of frost as the low dips down to +4. A mix of sun and cloud for tomorrow, then clouding over near noon with a high of 17. Cloudy on Thursday with a 30% chance of showers and a high of 15. Friday is looking better with sunshine and 17 degrees. A few clouds and 18 for Saturday. A mix of sun and cloud on Sunday, getting up to 21, and even warmer on Monday, up to 23 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 19 degrees with an average low of 4. Highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1981 at 33 degrees. A record low -2 in 2003. Sunrise was at 7:10 and sunset at 7:42 p.m. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast, clouds and a 50% chance of showers for both Victoria and Vancouver with a high near 17. Calgary, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 13. And a 30% chance of showers for Edmonton with 16 degrees. 24 degrees in Regina tomorrow under mainly sunny skies. Similar conditions in Saskatoon with a high of 21. Winnipeg has a 60% chance of showers, and they may get a thunderstorm as well. Looking good in Toronto with a few clouds and 23, sunny and 22 for Ottawa. A bit cooler in Montreal with a sunny 22 degrees. In the Maritimes, sunny and 18 for Fredericton, New Brunswick, 16 degrees under mainly sunny skies in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Cooler in Charlottetown, PEI, only getting to 12 with a mix of sun and cloud. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of rain and a high near 11 degrees. Manufacturing sales fell 1.3% to $57.2 billion in July, tumbling much more than the 0.2% decline economists had expected. Statistics Canada reports sales were down in 11 industries it tracks, representing 66.8% of total manufacturing sales. Motor vehicle industry sales dropped 4.7%, partly due to an extended shutdown at a major assembly plant for maintenance projects. The BC Council of Forest Industries has laid out a 60-point plan to revitalize the province's forestry sector. Council President Susan Yurkovich says this includes accelerating replanting and targeting a maximum timeline of 24 months to salvage timber following wildfires. The plan comes as the province struggles with mill closures and curtailments, leading to substantial job losses. The provincial government says it wants to help BC's interior forestry workers affected by mill closures. Imperial Oil has appointed a new president who will take over as chairman and chief executive when Rich Kruger retires at the end of this year. The Calgary-based company says Kruger showed outstanding leadership and dedication over nearly 7 years as CEO. It says Brad Corson takes on his new duties as president effective today and will become chairman and chief executive on January 1st. Corson joined ExxonMobil, which owns about 70% of Imperial, as a project engineer in 1983 and has held a variety of technical operations, commercial and managerial assignments around the world, including key leadership positions in Hong Kong and London. Now here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 83 points to 16,834. The Dow Jones was up 33 points to 27,110. And the Nasdaq was up 32 points to 8186. The S&P 500 was up 7 points to 3,005. Oil was down $4.09 to $58.81, and natural gas was down 2 cents at $2.66. Gold down 22 cents at $1,501.17. Silver was steady at $18.02. Wheat came in at $5.93 a bushel. Barley was at $4.42 a bushel. Canola at $10.23, and corn at $7.16 a bushel. Live cattle up $1.35, feed cattle up $2.63, and lean hogs were down $1.53. And the Canadian dollar is sitting at 75.51 in U.S. funds. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, RCMP are still searching for a suspect after a shooting at the Cross Iron Mills Mall just outside of Calgary left one man seriously injured. Well, we are 1 week into the federal election and the NDP has made some big campaign promises. We'll hear more about that coming right up as Hal Roberts chats with Lethbridge candidate Shandy Blyken. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Lethbridge Public Library is proud to join communities across the country in a national celebration of literacy, storytelling, and the literary arts by bringing the Word on the Street Festival on September 21st, beginning at 11 a.m. at the Lethbridge Public Library main branch. Enjoy free workshops and demonstrations, street performers, live music, and more. For more information, visit thewordonthestreet.ca/Lethbridge. Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers is holding their first ever 5K Color Fun Run on Saturday, October 19th from 9 to 11 a.m. at Legacy Regional Park in Lethbridge. They're also looking for volunteers to help make this event a success. All proceeds to go to Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers. For more information about the run and volunteer opportunities, email lcsa1983@gmail.com or visit Southern Alberta Crime Stoppers Facebook page. Do you or someone you love have a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 408 13th Street North. For more information and meeting times, call 403-331-0822. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
We are in the thick of a federal election campaign and we want to hear from all of the Lethbridge candidates. Joining me at the desk today is Shandy Blyken, the federal NDP candidate for Lethbridge riding. Welcome to BCN, Shandy.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So what made you decide to throw your hat into the ring and get involved in politics?
Well, I'm a prairie girl. I was born in the middle of a Saskatchewan blizzard. My dad actually ended up on the side of the road with his thumb out because his van broke down. He made it there just in time for me to be born. And my family took me across Canada as we chased precarious work, but I always seemed to end up back in Alberta, and now Lethbridge is definitely my home. I love it here so much. I've had a lot of fantastic opportunities over the years to volunteer and be part of community organizing, and I've just been so inspired by our communities that I wanted a way to give back and bring our collective voices into the conversation in Ottawa, so I decided to run.
So originally from Saskatchewan, does that mean you bleed Ryder green?
Oh, obviously.
Okay. How's the campaigning been going so far and the door knocking?
It's been fantastic. I really love meeting with people on the doors. I love seeing all the dogs in this town. I'm a big fan of small dogs.
Okay.
But it's just been really great to talk about people and their concerns, the things that they have, and hope for the future, and bring them the vision that the NDP has to make Canada and Lethbridge a better place.
Shandy, what do you see as the biggest election issues so far?
Well, when I've been talking to people on their doorsteps and in the community, two big things have been coming up for the most part. People are very concerned about the climate crisis. I've talked to young moms who are really afraid of the smoky summers, not being able to bring their little people outside, afraid of the damage to their lungs. I know many young couples who are choosing not to have children because they're so afraid of the world that they could be bringing their kids into, and that's a real concern. And the other thing that is so prevalent is people are concerned about affordability. People are struggling to pay their rent, they're struggling to pay for their prescription medication, for their child care, for the cost of tuition. One story that has really just resonated with me and stuck with me and kept me going is an elderly woman from Standoff decided to move to Lethbridge just to be closer to the hospital and medical services, and just due to the extreme cost of housing and the lack of accessible housing for her to find, she ended up having to move back to Standoff, and that just really breaks my heart.
Reconciliation and Indigenous rights is really a big part of who you are, isn't it?
It definitely is. I strongly believe that we need to do so much more than we have been to respect these nations that were here before we were. When we signed treaties, they were a sign, a promise between both sides that we would respect each other and that we would respect the land that we live on. So I am fully committed and passionate about making sure that First Nations people have what they were promised in the beginning. So that includes implementing UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That means implementing the Spirit Bear Plan, making sure that Jordan's Principle and Shannon's Dream become a reality.
Now, let's talk a bit about climate change. You touched on it a little bit earlier, Shandy. How exactly are you going to reduce carbon emissions, and what kind of increase to the carbon tax are needed to really achieve the NDP's goals?
Well, I'm really excited about our climate action plan. One of the things that excites me most, because it has a beautiful impact on Lethbridge, is we're going to do a lot to invest in small, collective, renewable energy projects. So if people in Lethbridge wanted to get together and put together a solar bank so that we could create energy for all of Lethbridge, we could do that. And we're also going to work on retrofitting government buildings across the sector, homes, so we can reduce the energy costs for families while also reducing their carbon footprint.
Now, you believe that the climate change plan will create about 300,000 jobs? How's that possible?
Well, what's interesting is that we already are living in a diversified economy. As of, I believe it was 2017, 3% of national GDP was already coming from the renewable energy sector. We have this college here that is putting out highly skilled people already ready for this industry. These jobs already exist. We just need a government that's committed to creating more of them.
Okay, diversifying the economy is wonderful. You know, investing more maybe in wind energy, solar farms and so forth. But what about the oil and gas sector? You know, it's been hurting in Alberta for a very long time. So how would the NDP actually support perhaps maybe getting more pipelines built? Or do you want to stay away from pipelines altogether?
Well, I'm running for Lethbridge and Lethbridge County. We're not building a pipeline here. So what I really care about is the economy in Lethbridge and jobs for people in Lethbridge. Now, for Lethbridge, about 20% of GDP is agricultural. And if you count the offshoot industries like food processing, that goes up to more about half. So the NDP really want to focus on helping out local farmers and food production so that we're purchasing more of what we're producing locally. That will also reduce carbon emissions, and it will help the farmers who are the stewards of our land.
How can we attract more agricultural businesses to our region then, southwestern Alberta, and in particular Lethbridge?
Well, we can do that by offering funding, especially for small farms, so that people are willing to go back to the family farm. They're excited about staying on the farm and growing that.
Now, the NDP also has a plan about taxing the wealthiest Canadians. Now, what do you say to critics who say that at this point, that could result in business owners taking their companies to other countries?
Well, we know that taxation can definitely be something that businesses consider when they're looking for somewhere to make their home. But corporations when they're looking at tax rates, they're thinking about tax rates just about as much as I would be thinking about just the price when I'm buying a car. I want to know that that car runs well, not just that it's a good price. So we have highly skilled workers in Canada, we have great infrastructure, great public services, and these are things that corporations look for as much, if not more, than low tax rates.
Now, what about healthcare? It's always a top election issue, right? And the NDP strongly believes in universal pharmacare, including dental, hearing, vision, mental health care for Canadians by 2020. But how are you going to turn that around in such a quick period of time? And who's going to pay for that?
Well, like we were just talking about, we're going to ask the very, very wealthiest among us just to pay a little bit more. Our wealth tax is 1% on accumulated wealth of 20 million or more. So the money from that can go towards increasing healthcare. Also, a national pharmacare plan in which we collectively use our bargaining power instead of each doing it on our own as provinces. The PBO has estimated will save us around $4 billion.
How about the potential of taxing Canadians more to pay for some of the promises that the NDP has brought forward?
We're not going to raise the taxes on everyday Canadians or small businesses. We are just asking the very wealthiest to pay just a little bit more to contribute to this country that we already know and love.
Now, how about education? I understand with the NDP as well that you're looking at potentially having free post-secondary education. I know a lot of young students who are looking at going to college, university are pretty excited about the potential, but how would that be funded? Who would pay for that?
Well, we know that students are already struggling. Tuition costs are constantly rising. The tuition that I was paying when I was in school several years ago is already $1,500 to $2,000 higher.
And the books are $200-300 each a lot of
yeah,
times,
they're
right?
so expensive. Just the other night I was talking to a grandmother who told me how concerned she is about her grandson because now he's graduated, he has to pay off his student loans, and she doesn't know how he's going to manage to do that while also caring for his young family. So the first thing we would do is work to take away interest payments from student loans. So when students were making their payments, they would just be paying towards the principal, not the interest. Working towards tuition free would be something that we would work towards a little bit more slowly, but that's definitely something that we need to work on because students need to be educated to get jobs in our new economy, and that education is becoming very inaccessible.
Let's say the NDP was to form government. Jagmeet Singh, new Prime Minister here in Canada. And what about all of the students that have all of those student loans already? Like my son, for instance, he has $25,000 of student loans.
Oh, I feel that.
Oh, right? So what about students who already have the student loans? What would you say to those students? Would you forgive some of that debt, or what would happen to it?
I'm not sure what we would do about that going forward. I would have to look into that a little bit more, but I do know that we're committed to wiping away the interest that's paid. I know that when I'm making my student loan payment right now, almost half of my payment is going towards interest and half is going towards the principal. If I didn't have to pay for that interest, I could pay off my loan in twice the time.
People run for their parties because they believe in the ideologies, what the party stands for, but they also believe in the leader. What is it that you like about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh?
Oh man, where do I start? He's hilarious. He's warm, engaging, authentic. I had the chance to meet him a couple of weeks ago in Calgary, and he told this beautiful story about having to take care of his younger brother when he was in university, and the love that he had for his brother, his willingness to sacrifice for his family because that came first, really resonated with me. We actually ended up talking for a little while after because I was a bit teary and moved by that, and he just gave me this hug, and I knew that there was this person in front of me who was fighting for the same things that I believed in.
That's wonderful. We have an opioid crisis here in our city and a homeless issue. What's the NDP plan to really address that?
What's so exciting about our pharmacare program is that it will allow everyone to have access not just to the prescription medication that they need, but we will work towards things like increased mental health support access, which is a definite need because so many people who are struggling are doing so because they have trauma, and we need to have therapy to support that trauma. We also have a national housing strategy. We want to build 500,000 new units of accessible housing in the next 10 years, with 250,000 of those being built in the next 5 years. And I know that housing is the one solution that we have to homelessness. If you have a home, you're not homeless anymore. So that is just one aspect of our strategy. We would also immediately declare a public health crisis and do everything we can to support the wraparound supports that are already on the ground in our communities.
Do you see any conflicts or any real issues with an NDP government working with a lot of conservative governments, provincial governments across the country? I mean, we have conservative governments, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, right? So how would that look? How are you envisioning that to look?
We are all here because we care about the best interests of our constituents, of Canadians, of the provinces. So we are here to work with people to take care of the people that live in our country.
What about the NDP's immigration policy? Tell me a bit about that.
So many immigrants that come here have fantastic credentials from other countries, but they find it incredibly difficult to get jobs. We've all heard the stories of dentists driving taxis and doctors driving taxis, and so the NDP is committed to making it easier and fairer for people to get those credentials carried over to Canada. We're also committed to faster family reunification. Just recently, there was this very tragic moment where thousands of people were trying to just express interest in sponsoring their parents and grandparents to come to Canada, but there was a cap on how many people could just hit that they were interested, and so within 10 minutes that system went down. And so we don't believe that there should be a cap. People should be allowed to bring their parents and grandparents and spouses to Canada in a very fair and compassionate way.
Where do you think the NDP needs to improve? Every party says there's always room for improvement, right? Nobody's perfect. Where do you think the party needs to improve? Where do they really need to reach out to?
I think that we need to do more to reach out to marginalized communities and show them that we're fighting for them.
Such as, outside of the Indigenous community, who else?
Well, there are so many people who are struggling to get by to pay for their rent and their medication, and some of those people may not necessarily feel like the NDP is in it for them. They might think that, oh, it's for the other guy, but we really need to just connect with the people who actually live here. So we can always do a better job of reaching out and pulling people in.
So Shandy, sometimes when people talk about the NDP, they get concerned about taxes being raised. Like, how are you going to pay for all of the extra costs with healthcare and education? How do you quell those fears that people may have?
Well, we definitely want to raise taxes, but not on everyday people, not on small businesses. We are asking the very wealthiest Canadians, the very wealthiest corporations to just pay a little bit more. So people may be afraid that their taxes are going to go up, but I can tell them that if you're making less than $20 million, you're not going to be part of our wealth tax. So your expenses are actually going to go down because we've estimated that businesses will actually save about $600 per employee per year with the National Pharmacare program. Families are looking at upwards of $500 a year in savings. I know that before both me and my partner had benefits at our jobs, we were still paying around $200 a month on prescriptions, even though I have a fantastic benefit plan through my job. People shouldn't need to be employed and have a benefits plan through their employer to be able to access the medication that they need.
Unseating the incumbent is a real challenge, and Rachel Harder's had a strong voice here with the Conservative Party of Canada in Lethbridge. What's it going to take to beat Rachel Harder at the polls?
It's going to take people believing that I'm in it for them. I'm here to work for the people of Lethbridge. I'm here to bring our voices to the conversation, all of our diverse voices.
Wonderful. Shandy Blanken, federal NDP candidate for the Lethbridge riding. Thanks for joining me today on Bridge City News.
Thank you for having me.
Images are being released of the Iran-linked drone attack on a Saudi oil facility through satellite images. To talk more about it and what the damages that occurred so far to the markets is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa joining me via Skype from Los Angeles. Lisa, oil spiked as high as 20%, but settled back down to about 10% for an increase recently. What do we know about these Saudi oil strikes?
Well, the strikes are significant, and they're significant for reasons other than what the media is telling you. The media is telling you that this is like, half of Saudi Arabia's supply, and it's going to put, some sort of lacking in the world supply, and that it'll mean, the biggest jump in oil prices we've ever seen in history. These are all hyperbole. As you said, it settled right back into about 8 to 10%. Increase, and we'll see a kind of a correction as we go on, but of course the markets are going to react to something as shocking, I would say, as something like this. You didn't expect a extra regional player to go after another player's oil fields. We haven't seen that in a while, other than in the context of actual war. So it's significant. With regards to Saudi supply, probably about 5%. I don't think this is much more significant than that. But this, with regards to what's going on with the heightened tensions with the Iranian regime, with Iran denying what's going on, with the U.S. pointing fingers, with the opportunity that it opens up for many other players in the oil arena, so to speak, I think this is quite significant. But with regards to a lot of the reports that we were seeing from last night through this morning, I think a lot of them are exaggeration.
Will North American energy companies in the United States and Canada really benefit from the Saudi supply disruption?
Sure, I mean there's an opportunity to do so, but knowing the Middle East and the usual suspects and the usual oil suppliers, they won't allow the price of oil to go to a place where they will be outcasted. At the same time, does this open up the possibility that others can get into the game? Of course it does. Donald Trump has already said that we will offer up supplies in the U.S. I know Canada has a supply. Again, the opportunity, the potential is there. But let's rewind for a bit here. What was Iran's calculation in all of this? The Iranian regime really think that by hitting the Saudi supply that they would be entering the scene again and they'd be able to sell oil again? This only tells us one thing, that the Iranian regime is truly suffering under the very direct and targeted sanctions, particularly the ones that aim to curb Iran in its oil sector, in the selling of oil and collecting funds. But we know that Iran has barrels of oil waiting, with China, with India, with other players that are willing to buy cheap oil. And I think maybe perhaps their plan backfired, and this only makes other people look better, like the Saudis, like the U.S. in the oil sector. Perhaps Canada can get in there. We have a lot of other players that can get in there. But again, this is more significant in a geopolitical stance than anything else. I know people who watch the markets, my husband being one of them, was just studying the numbers on a Sunday when this took place over the weekend, waiting to see how this would affect the markets, waiting to see how this would truly come out in terms of numbers on Monday morning. And I don't think it's as significant as we thought it would be, but it will be significant politically going down the line.
A new report out says U.S. President Donald Trump says it's incorrect that he's willing to meet Iran with no conditions whatsoever. Tell me more about that.
Right. So, we've had a very weird couple of weeks with regard to U.S.-Iran relations. We had the firing or resignation. It's a he said story with John Bolton and President Trump with regards to President Trump asking or John Bolton resigning from his position as National Security Advisor. We all know that John Bolton is quite hawkish, particularly when it comes to hot zones like Iran and Afghanistan, Venezuela, etc. But with regards to Iran, the removal of John Bolton opened up this big question mark or possibility of the United States sitting down with Iran with no preconditions. We don't know how this phrase got in there, no preconditions. Why would the United States sit down with Iran with no preconditions when we're the ones holding the leverage over Iran? Iran's regime wants to sit down with the U.S., of course, ever since the United States pulled out of the nuclear deal in May of 2018. It's been something that has hurt the Iranian regime. Obviously, their economy is crippled by the sanctions, and they don't have the normal trade partners, and the deal was what gave them hope to normalize relations with the West. So, of course, now this news, in light of what happened over the weekend and the strikes on the oil fields, is correcting this phrase of no preconditions. I think it's still on the table from what we heard from advisors over the weekend, that Donald Trump would be open to meeting with Iran, but we're going to have conditions.
There's news out of China, Lisa, and that the Asian nation is banning flying pigeons and drones as Beijing's preparing for its 70th anniversary military parade.
Well, when you have so many enemies inside and outside your country, you don't want any flying objects over even a happy occasion, because you won't be able to differentiate between enemy and self. So, it makes sense that China would ban such a thing, and particularly knowing the Chinese government and how they're wonderful at banning and censoring and, curbing the population. This is yet again another example of that.
Australian intelligence says that China was responsible for a cyber attack on its national parliament and the three largest political parties before the general election in May. That's according to a new report from Reuters.
Yes, this is a very, very curious story. What does China have to do with Australia? What are they doing there? Why are they hacking their infrastructure? It goes to show that China's sights are set far beyond what we believe. It's not just about Hong Kong. It's not just about sitting down with the U.S. over a trade deal. But when you look at China's activities, whether it's in the continent of Africa, in the continent of Latin America, and now we're hearing about Australia, it's that they have an expansionist view. And with this perspective, they are going everywhere. And of course, they lead with what they're strong at, and that is cyber crimes and hacking and technology. And we know for a fact that they own so many of the technology highways, so to speak, the information highways in Latin America and Africa. I mean, these are places that they're investing their time and energy. They are flexing their muscles. They are taking over where maybe the rest of the world, particularly the West, is really sleeping on this. It's a wake-up call. Military might is not the only thing, and it's not what leads us anymore. It's not the barometer to measure a nation's wealth and superiority anymore. I know superiority is probably a bad word in today's political climate, but we're looking at other things, and I think China has this game down pat. They realize that they need to grow with regards to technology and expand, and what better way to show the world their might than to do it through their cyber capabilities.
Lisa, new reports say North Korea's Kim Jong-un has invited Trump to visit Pyongyang. Now, with new North Korea-U.S. talks highly likely, will a deal result?
Who knows, right? We had one first meeting that was called historic, and we had photos, and it looked wonderful. And in the aftermath, President Trump said it was amazing, and they've become the best of friends. And then we had a second one that was pretty lukewarm. And again, the celebration being just the fact that they met, but nothing resulting from the meeting. At the same time, since the second meeting, there's been some positive news out of the relations between the U.S. and North Korea, and then some negative news. And I think, a lot of eyes are on North Koreans, a lot of eyes are on Washington to see who will make the next move and who really has the upper hand here. It's not as clear as perhaps the situation with Iran or China, but with North Korea, who's the one who's not coming to the table and who's the one who kind of pulled out. So now Kim Jong-un invites Donald Trump once again. Are we any closer to striking a deal? Who knows? But the fact that they would meet again is a positive development in this ongoing courtship, so to speak.
Yeah, the dance continues, absolutely. The political crisis is deepening in Hong Kong, Lisa, as protesters have retaken the streets. They were hurling gas bombs at government buildings in the latest wave of unrest.
Yes, if you study the history of the people of Hong Kong, if you look at the temperament of the people in Hong Kong, if you look at just the history of this newish protest, 99 days, it seems to be gaining ground and gaining momentum, becoming increasingly violent, becoming increasingly heightened. And I think the people of Hong Kong, they recognize an opportunity and they're not backing down anytime soon. The government, likewise, doesn't want this to, doesn't want this to go away without the message being heard, but at the same time, it might be out of their control at this point. They can use tear gas. They don't want to use anything more. We're not seeing an escalation in the crackdowns on the protesters, which is a good thing. And it only tells us that this will continue for the time being. It's a very, very delicate situation. We're watching the Chinese and how they're dealing with it, moving assets into Hong Kong more and more every day, trying to do something about it without having this heightened, because China can't afford to do that. But I think had we been in a different political climate with regards to China, we would have seen a bloodbath. We would have seen, the crackdowns from the first day, and for them not to allow this to get to the point that it's gotten. But until then, I think that timing is on the side of the people of Hong Kong, and they will continue to use that to their favor.
U.S. and Afghan troops claim to have killed at least 38 Taliban fighters, Lisa. Afghan women are afraid their hard-won freedom may be in jeopardy as Taliban talks resume. Tell me more about that.
Sure. What a different place we're in with regards to the Taliban in Afghanistan than we were about a month ago, right? We were talking about talks between the U.S. and the Taliban in order to ensure a better future for the people of Afghanistan. And of course, we knew that that was a pipe dream in and of itself, because Taliban, a terrorist organization that's brought nothing but bloodshed and terrorism to the people of Afghanistan, did not have the potential or the intention of bringing any sort of peace or calm or stability to the people of Afghanistan. And now that the U.S. pulled out of the talks with Afghanistan, we're seeing more and more bloodshed. We're seeing suicide bombings. We're seeing the Taliban show their true colors as they were before. That's what you can't even blame them for. They were showing us their true colors all throughout, and the West was pretending that it was not happening and that we would continue with talks. Now that the U.S. formally pulled out of talks with the Taliban, we're seeing more reports of a crackdown on the Taliban, where assets in that region are going after Taliban fighters, perhaps also making a symbolic move to say that terrorism will not be tolerated. If you want to sit down with the U.S. once again, if talks are going to be reinstated, then you need to earn that position at the table and that negotiating power. Of course, the people of Afghanistan have always been, for decades, they've lived with this instability, and of course now more than ever, women are worried, children are worried, people who are in this position of vulnerability are worried that they will go backwards in time, because their future is so dim that they have to almost count on the Taliban, a terrorist organization, to take them to the next chapter, to take them to the next place in their history. And that's a very, very bleak future. So, it's not an easy situation. What is the solution for Afghanistan? How can they nation build when they don't have, the infrastructure, they don't have a leader, they don't have the right tools in order to do so?
Tunisia is holding only its second free presidential poll since the 2011 uprising that toppled ex-President Ben Ali that sparked the Arab Spring. Lisa, 26 candidates, including 2 women, are running in the election.
Yeah, it's a very interesting election. We have outliers that are leading in the last count. I don't know if the final call was made yet, but the guy who's in the lead is, came out of nowhere. Of course, you have a nation where there was a dictatorship, the Arab Spring changed all that. This is their second election. They're trying their best at nation building. They're trying their best to hold a democratic election of sorts. And we know that that has a very different meaning for all different countries, particularly ones where there really isn't a true democracy, but perhaps one that aspires to be democrat, I should say, ish. So they're trying their best. And I think the election, just the fact that so many people can run, that women can run, that people who are even in jail, the second runner-up, the guy who was actually slated to win, was running from prison, a media mogul of sorts. But the guy who I think is most in the lead right now, he has about 19%. The last time I checked, he's, out of nowhere kind of guy, and maybe that's the solution for the Middle East, one of their own to lead them and to kind of to set an example. Remember, Tunisia was the country that set the example for the Arab Spring. It's not talked about as often, but the street vendor who set himself on fire as an example to say we've had enough, that's where the Arab Spring started. And now this election, it's truly a symbolic event that shows that where there's a will, there's a way, and the people of Tunisia led the way to this election day.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.